The latest of those is Shreveport City Councilman John Nickelson. Hey, Mr. John, welcome back to Keel. How you doing today?
Hey, good morning. I'm well. How are y'all?
Yeah, don't forget you control that seat. I control this seat, okay?
So tell us about yesterday. Tell us what that was about. A little,
Man.
a little heated back and forth between you and Councilman Green. Yes.
Well, look, let me say first that Councilman Green is my friend and colleague, and I do my best to maintain good relationships with all members of the council. I did express some frustration yesterday about the fact that Councilman Green indicated he intended to vote against every amendment to the budget proposed by any member of the council. I think we all have a responsibility to consider budget amendments and every matter that comes before the council on its merits. And that was what initiated that exchange.
So Aaron tried to explain it to me. I'm not much for math. Maybe you can help us all out. In the midst of putting together, of approving the budget for next year, we find out we're $1.4 million short. Do I understand that correctly? And how does that happen, especially at this late stage in the process?
So the council's internal audit office, which has done an outstanding job this year, called to the council's attention earlier this month, well, last month now actually, the fact that there was significant spending in excess of appropriated amounts by several city departments. The charter allocates different responsibilities to the council and the mayor, and one of the council's most important responsibilities is deciding how much money will be spent by each department on various categories of spending. We know from internal audit's investigation that about $1.4 million as of a couple of weeks ago had been spent that the budget had not approved. That's a really serious matter. And in fact, the charter says that a finance director who approves spending in excess of budget is personally liable for those expenditures.
How does that happen and nobody catches it?
Well, look, it shouldn't happen. We should have an accounting system in place that prevents the posting of transactions in excess of appropriate amounts, and apparently we don't. We've had discussions for the past several months about the challenges that the city's finance department has faced, and this is another serious example.
Mr. Green, Reverend Green says he's voting against all the amendments today. How does he propose making up this $1.4 million? Rather than pointing fingers at you and yelling at you in a meeting like he did, what's his answer?
Well, we have two sets of amendments that are on the agenda today. Some concern the 2019 budget, which is where that $1.4 million of overages is. I don't think Councilman Green was saying he intends to vote against those budget amendments. Those were proposed by the administration, and they will bring our budget in line after the fact with the spending that has occurred. The 2020 budget amendments are the ones that he indicated he would vote against. And I don't know what his plan is for conforming the budget to the will of the council if he intends to vote against every amendment.
Mr. John, I'm going back to last year when somebody wrote that $189,000 check to the state that nobody knew about. And now there's $1.4 million in overages, and we're trying to put together a budget. And do I have a tinfoil hat on in somehow linking those two when it comes to a lack of control or a lack of oversight?
They both reflect insufficient financial controls. They're different issues, but both are examples of the fact that we, at least as of earlier this year, I don't know the current status of some of these controls, and the CAO could speak to that. But until changes were made earlier this year, we did not have appropriate or even basic financial controls in place in the finance department, which is tremendously concerning given the amount of taxpayer money that department is responsible for managing.
Excuse me, but yeah, you just said the CAO could speak to that, and I don't mean to speak ill of Ms. Jones, but she was in the pipeline that didn't know about the $189,000, and nobody seems to have known until now that we were 1.4 over. Are you kind of jumping up and down about this? And if not you, who will?
Well, To the extent anyone is jumping up and down, I am. Councilman Butcher is concerned about it. Other members of the council, I've also talked to Councilman Fleury and Councilman Fuller, or Councilwoman Fuller, rather, about this. We're all very concerned. I mean, if the administration does not conform spending to the council's budget, then what are we doing passing a budget at all?
John, the big picture thing, though, for me is where are we on the reserve fund? I know it's critically low. How are we responsibly going to deal with that in a city of our size? What are we at?
Well, look, my comment yesterday was that we need to treat the $3 million reserve that was budgeted for 2019 as the absolute floor and move up from there over time. The 2020 budget that is before the council now provides for a reserve of right around $1 million on $210 million of revenue. That wouldn't be responsible in your household, and it's not responsible for the city. I have an amendment on the agenda which would move $3 million from the street special revenue fund to the reserve. Of course, if something came up next year and we needed to move money back or spend it, we could. But our starting point needs to be a general fund operating reserve that is more than, not less than, the $3 million budgeted for 19. Fiscal responsibility has got to be our top priority.
Mr. John, let's go back a second to your back and forth yesterday with Councilman, with Reverend Green, and walk a second in his shoes. Can you at least begin to understand, is there any logic and or reason to his objection to the way that the monies were being moved around? Does it make any sense to you at all?
I think the exchange between myself and Councilman Green reflects a difference in understanding of the council's role and how robustly it should exercise that role. My perspective is that the council is responsible for the budget. The mayor is charged by the charter with proposing a budget, but the budget belongs to the council. It's our work, it's our responsibility, and we have to answer for it. Councilman Green suggested that the numerous amendments proposed would hijack the budget from the mayor. I don't track that because the budget doesn't belong to the mayor. It's not his ultimate responsibility. It is the council's responsibility.
Can the mayor veto the entire budget or those amendments? He's got a line item power. Can he do that? Do we know yet?
He cannot veto an amendment to the budget. An amendment's not a final action, and so it takes 4 votes to amend the budget. Once the budget is approved by a vote of 4 members of the council, the mayor does have a line item veto, but he cannot, as he can with many other council actions, veto the entire thing.